So you're diving into the future of work. Huh, I get it. Those headlines about robots taking over, they can make anyone feel a little nervous. And judging by the materials you send over, you're particularly interested in whether humans are just going to become, obsolete. Well, let's dive into these excerpts you shared from the Alternative World podcast, specifically the episode titled The Future of Work, When Humans Become Obsolete. It seems like you're all wondering if we're about to be replaced by some, super efficient algorithm. They paint a very vivid picture right off the bat, describing automation as this, unstoppable force, an avalanche gaining speed. And it's not just factory workers sweating about robots this time, is it? We're talking about AI infiltrating fields like law, medicine, even creative industries. I mean, we've all heard those stories about robots building cars. But this feels different. They talk about machines handling decision-making, creativity, even emotional intelligence. That hits a little too close to home, don't you think?
What's fascinating is that this fear of machines replacing us, it isn't new. Remember the Industrial Revolution? People were terrified back then, too, and for good reason. But as the source points out, this time it's different. It's not just our muscles being replaced, it's our minds. AI has the potential to replicate, maybe even surpass human intelligence in ways we never imagined.
Okay, now I'm really starting to sweat. And it's not just hypothetical, right? They dropped this bombshell statistic from the McKinsey Global Institute. A potential loss of 800 million jobs to automation by 2030.
That's also long. Well, that's a whole lot of people suddenly needing new careers. What does that even look like for someone like you, listening right now? Are you going to need to completely reinvent yourself in the next few years just to stay afloat?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the source does acknowledge that new jobs will emerge, especially in fields like robotics and AI development. But, and it's a big but, these new jobs require a whole new set of specialized skills. It's like the game is changing, and the entry fee is getting steeper by the minute. So how do we even begin to navigate this skills gap? What advice does the podcast offer?
The source stresses that those who adapt will thrive. It's about identifying your existing skills, recognizing your weaknesses, and actively pursuing opportunities to learn and grow. Think of it as a constant game of upskilling, always staying one step ahead of machines.
So it's not just about robots taking our jobs. It's about other people who have the right skills outcompeting us. Now, that's a sobering thought. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What skills do you have that are truly irreplaceable?
You've hit on a really important point there. The source argues that this isn't just about losing a paycheck. It's about, losing a part of ourselves. For many people, their work is deeply intertwined with their identity, their sense of purpose.
They actually quote someone in the podcast saying, for many people, their identity is closely tied to their work. That really resonated with me. It's easy to imagine feeling lost, even worthless, if the skills you've honed over a lifetime suddenly become irrelevant. It's like the rug being pulled out from under you.
Absolutely. And the source takes it a step further, suggesting that this could have a ripple effect on society as a whole. Imagine a large segment of the population feeling like their skills are obsolete, left behind by this technological revolution. That's not just an economic problem. It's a recipe for social unrest.
Okay, so we're staring down a potential dystopian future here, with mass unemployment and social upheaval. But surely the podcast doesn't leave us completely without hope, does it? There have to be solutions, right?
Don't worry, they don't leave us hanging. The podcast emphasizes that this isn't an inevitable doomsday scenario. This transition to a more automated world won't happen overnight, and we have a window of opportunity to adapt and prepare.
So it's less about if this is happening and more about how we navigate it. What kind of strategies does the podcast suggest? How do we avoid becoming casualties in this robot revolution?
They highlight a few key areas where action is needed. One is the role of governments and organizations in providing robust retraining programs and encouraging lifelong learning. It's about making sure people have access to the education and training they need to stay ahead of the curve and thrive in this new landscape.
So we're talking about equipping people with the skills to not just survive, but to actually succeed in this new world. That makes sense, but it also sounds expensive. Who's footing the bill for all this retraining?
That's a great question. And it leads into another solution the source explores: ensuring the benefits of automation are distributed equitably. The idea is that if corporations are reaping huge profits from robots and AI, those profits should be shared with the workforce, especially those who might be displaced by these technologies.
It's like that old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. But what about those who are struggling to stay afloat right now? Those who are already out of work because their jobs have been automated. What happens to them while we're busy retraining everyone else?
The podcast doesn't shy away from that thorny issue. In fact, they delve into a pretty radical solution: universal basic income, or UBI.
UBI. Okay, I've heard that term thrown around. But to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Can you give me the rundown?
Sure. The basic idea is that everyone, regardless of their employment status, receives a guaranteed income from the government, enough to cover their basic needs. The source presents both sides of this debate, highlighting the potential benefits and drawbacks.
Okay, let's unpack those. What are the arguments for and against UBI in a world increasingly run by algorithms?
Proponents argue that UBI would provide a crucial safety net, allowing people to retrain, pursue entrepreneurial endeavors, or even dedicate themselves to creative pursuits without the constant pressure of financial insecurity. It's about giving people the freedom to explore new possibilities and contribute to society in different ways.
That sounds pretty utopian, but I can already hear the skeptics. What are the concerns about implementing something like UBI? Wouldn't it be incredibly expensive, and wouldn't it discourage people from working altogether?
Those are some of the main criticisms leveled against UBI. Critics worry about the potential cost of such a program and whether it would disincentivize work, leading to a decrease in productivity and economic output. It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides, and the source doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
It seems like there's no easy solution.
Yeah.
But knowing all of this, are there specific jobs or industries that we should be particularly worried about? I mean, if I'm listening to this and starting to panic, where should I be directing my anxiety?
That's a question many of us are asking. The podcast actually cites a report from the World Economic Forum, which suggests that jobs heavily reliant on routine tasks, whether physical or cognitive, are the most vulnerable to automation.
So we're talking about factory workers, data entry clerks, telemarketers, those kinds of roles where a robot or an algorithm can easily step in and do the same work more efficiently.
Exactly. Those are the jobs where the tasks are predictable and easily replicable. But here's the thing. The podcast argues that even fields that require a high level of education and specialized skills aren't immune to this shift.
Really? Even jobs that we traditionally think of as requiring human intelligence and creativity. Give me an example. How could a robot possibly replace a lawyer or a doctor?
Let's start with law. The source points out that AI is already being used in legal research, a task that used to take lawyers countless hours to complete. Imagine an AI that can sift through mountains of legal documents in seconds, finding the needle in the haystack of case law that would take a human researcher days or even weeks to uncover.
Okay, that's impressive. I'll give you that. But surely that doesn't replace the need for lawyers entirely. What's left for a human lawyer to do if a machine can do all the research?
The podcast makes a crucial distinction here. It's not about replacement, it's about evolution. The role of the lawyer, rather than disappearing, transforms. Instead of spending all their time on research, lawyers can now focus on higher-level tasks like strategy, client interaction, negotiation, crafting compelling arguments in court, you know?
So it's not that lawyers become obsolete, they become strategists, right? They leverage the power of AI to work smarter, not harder. That makes sense. What about healthcare? Surely a robot can't replace a doctor's expertise and empathy.
You're right. A robot doctor might not be making house calls anytime soon, at least not for bedside manner. But the podcast explains how AI is already being used in healthcare in some pretty incredible ways. Imagine AI analyzing medical images with greater accuracy than humans, detecting early signs of diseases that might be missed by the human eye, or even assisting with complex surgical procedures.
Okay, I'll admit that's pretty amazing. But aren't we losing something important if we hand over these crucial tasks to machines? Where does human judgment and compassion fit into this picture?
That's the key point the source emphasizes. While AI can be an invaluable tool in healthcare, it lacks the empathy, the nuanced understanding of human emotions, and the ability to build trust and rapport that are essential to patient care.
So it's not about replacing doctors with robots, it's about creating a partnership where AI enhances human capabilities, allowing doctors to focus on the aspects of care that require a human touch. It seems like there's a theme emerging here. AI is a tool for augmentation, not replacement. Is that accurate?
Exactly. And this idea applies to another field the podcast explores: finance. Algorithms are already analyzing market trends, identifying investment opportunities, even executing trades at lightning speed, often surpassing human capabilities in terms of speed and data processing.
So even in a world driven by human behavior and seemingly irrational market swings, AI is making its mark. Does that mean stockbrokers and financial analysts are headed for the unemployment line?
The source argues that while AI can certainly disrupt traditional roles in finance, human expertise is still vital. Algorithms might be able to crunch numbers and spot patterns, but they don't have that intuition, that gut feeling, that ability to weigh risk and make judgment calls based on experience and understanding of market psychology.
So even in the complex world of finance, there's still a place for human intuition and expertise. It's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding the human element driving those numbers. I'm sensing a pattern here.
You're picking up what the source is putting down. Across industries and professions, the key takeaway is this. It's not about humans versus machines. It's about finding that synergy between human ingenuity and technological innovation.
It's about learning to work alongside these machines, not in fear of them, right? But that's easier said than done. It's one thing to talk about adapting and embracing change. It's another to actually do it, especially when it feels like the ground is constantly shifting beneath our feet.
I hear you. It's natural to feel overwhelmed, even a little terrified, by the pace of technological change. But the podcast encourages us to embrace this uncertainty, to view it not as a threat, but as an opportunity for growth and reinvention.
So how do we do that? How do we go from feeling overwhelmed to empowered in the face of such radical change? How do we embrace the unknown and come out stronger on the other side?
The podcast offers a roadmap for navigating this new world of work, a three-pronged approach to not just surviving, but thriving in the age of automation.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me the survival guide. What's step one?
The first step, and this might seem obvious, is to stay informed. The world of work is evolving at warp speed. So what we know today might be outdated tomorrow. You need to be plugged into those changes, constantly learning and adapting.
Staying informed. Got it. But how do we do that effectively? It feels like we're bombarded with information these days. Where do we even start?
The podcast suggests a multi-pronged approach. They recommend reading industry publications, attending conferences, and following thought leaders in your field. But they also stress the importance of diversifying your information diet.
Diversifying our information diet. I like that. So not just sticking to our usual echo chambers, right?
Exactly. Listen to podcasts outside your usual genres. Attend webinars on topics that are a little outside your comfort zone. The idea is to constantly expose yourself to new ideas and perspectives, to challenge your assumptions and broaden your understanding of the forces shaping the future of work.
That makes a lot of sense. So step one is about staying ahead of the curve, being proactive, not just reactive. What's the next step in this roadmap to future-proofing ourselves?
The second step is all about skills development. It's not enough to just know what's happening. You need to develop the skills to adapt to those changes. And this doesn't necessarily mean going back to school for another degree.
Okay, so what are we talking about then? How do we even know which skills to focus on when the landscape is changing so quickly?
The podcast emphasizes the importance of identifying your existing strengths and then finding ways to build on those strengths. Think about the skills you enjoy using, the tasks that come naturally to you, and consider how those skills might translate into emerging fields.
So it's about taking inventory of our current skill set and figuring out how to make it relevant in a world where robots are doing more and more of the heavy lifting. It's about finding our niche, that unique value proposition that only a human can offer.
You've got it. And that leads us to the third and perhaps most important step in this process, embracing adaptability.
Adaptability. That sounds great on paper, but it's easier said than done, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like a personality trait, something some people are just naturally better at than others. So how do we cultivate adaptability if it doesn't come naturally?
The podcast argues that adaptability is less about inherent traits and more about cultivating a mindset of continuous learning and growth. It's about being open to new experiences, embracing challenges as opportunities for learning, and developing the resilience to bounce back from setbacks.
So it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, with stepping outside our comfort zones and embracing the unknown. That's a big ask for a lot of people, especially in a world that feels increasingly uncertain. But it's also incredibly empowering, isn't it? It's about taking control of our own destinies, not just reacting to whatever the future throws at us.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the podcast's final takeaway. The future of work isn't some preordained path we're forced to follow. It's a choose-your-own-adventure story. And we all have the power to shape our own narratives.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So it's not about becoming obsolete. It's about becoming indispensable in a world that's constantly evolving. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the very real anxieties about job displacement to the potential for human ingenuity to thrive alongside AI. What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
If you take nothing else away from this conversation, remember this. The future of work isn't something to be feared. It's something to be shaped. By embracing lifelong learning, nurturing our uniquely human skills, and adapting to the changing demands of the job market, we can not only survive but thrive in this exciting new world.
It's not about racing against the machines, it's about learning to dance with them, right? Finding that synergy between human ingenuity and technological innovation, that's a future I can get behind. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about the future.
Hmm.
Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and keep those human sparks flying.